Hi, I'm Ryan, and you're watching my YouTube series on functional programming. If you're enjoying this series, please subscribe, like, or let me know in the comments. In this episode, we are going to talk about debugging functional code. A lot of times when you're writing functional programming, you will end up writing chains of functions using the pipe operator or the compose operator, and you might make mistakes because you wouldn't know where uh, where data gets transformed in a way that it is not acceptable by the next function in the chain. So in order to make our lives a little easier, we can learn how to debug a functional code using some utilities, which we are going to see in this video. So let's assume we have three functions here. The first adds a greeting to a name. The second adds an exclamation point or exclamation mark to a string. And the third simply prints. And we have a bunch of names here. Our desired output is to print the name of each Avenger with the greeting and the exclamation mark on separate lines. So if you haven't worked a lot with functional programming, one of the things you might likely do is you might say, okay, I have an array of names here. I want to first greet each name, and then I want to exclaim, and then I want to print. So let's see what happens if you run this code. Well, it seems like our code did run, right? It went through the sequence of functions. However, we only got the word Avenger, the greeting, once, and the exclamation at the end. And this might be tricky in the beginning to understand what is going on. So we have to create something that helps us debug. So I'm going to create a function called as trace, which is a curried function. So I'm going to use const trace is equal to curry. And what this function does is it lets you print out on the console the output between the functions in your chain. So let's say it takes a marker and it takes the argument and it console.log marker arg and return arg. So now I created an impure function called as trace, which prints the output, or sorry, the argument that's passed to it, and simply returns the arg. So what I can do now, I can introduce the function trace and add my marker. So I'm going to say this is after greet, and because it is part of the functional chain now, it's part of the pipe, so it is going to receive the output of the greet function. So let me clear my console and run the code, and let's see what happens. So now it says that after greet I have Avenger, Hulk, and Thor. So apparently greet did not run on each item of my array. And why is that so? So one of the key things you can learn or to debug, basically, one of the key things that you need to know when debugging code is always think about your functions in terms of what kind of inputs they expect and what kind of inputs they are actually receiving. So in this case, greet is expecting a string. And what are we passing greet? Names. And what is names? Names is an array, right? So names is an array and we are passing it to a function called as greet. So these are incompatible types. What you want to do is you want to pass each string in your array and you want to map on it. So I'm going to use this function called as map from Lambda, which I have talked about in the previous uh, episodes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to map on each item of the array that I receive and run the greet function on it. So now let me clear the console and run the code. As you can see, the prefix function ran on both the values in my array. That's great. However, my postfix did not run. So again, you can use the same logic that we used to debug earlier. So the input to exclaim is an array, whereas the expected input is a string. So what we need to do is we need to map over our array, right? And so for that, we're going to use the map function. And if you think about it, we also need to map on top of our print. And now if I clear the console and I run the code, I get my output. So to reiterate, whenever you debug code in functional programming, when you have a pipe or a compose, think about the function inputs and the function outputs and whether or not they're compatible with the next function in the chain. That's probably all it takes to debug this code. And a function like trace will help you actually see the inputs and the outputs in between your, the stack of functions that you have here. Well, that's about it for this video. I hope you found it useful, and stay tuned for more interesting stuff in the next episodes. Thanks for watching.